Good to see everyone. I see some folks drinking tea or coffee. I have my mug over here as well. And welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to be with you all again. As I was speaking with Dionne prior to this call, it's been a year since I've been with Reimagine, and so much has happened. But just wanted to send a quick shout out to this community. This was the first time that I've engaged with Reimagine last year this time. So good to see everyone 1 year later. And yeah, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is an amazing time. It's 12:05. Juneteenth is coming. So now what is the topic of today's Table Talk, part of an ongoing series at Reimagine called Table Talk, created by and for underrepresented communities. My name is Chris Thompson. I'm Reimagine's Director of Development, pronouns he, him. I'm currently wearing a black shirt. Outside of my head on the Zoom screen, there's two empty picture frames. Outside of that, two clocks, I'm sorry, East Coast and West Coast. So I can make sure that I'm aligned with my team based on the East and West Coast. And I'm full of joy today. It's a beautiful day here in the New Jersey area. I'm about 45 minutes outside of New York. But enough about me. This event is brought to you by Reimagine, a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community. People of different backgrounds, ages, races, and faiths, and no faith, coming together in the hopes of healing ourselves and the world. We specifically support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality, and at our own pace, actively channeling life's biggest challenges into meaningful action and growth. You can follow us online at letsreimagine.org, specifically to see previous table talks, letsreimagine.org/table talk. And so everyone here is welcome, but I'd like to underscore that this is a dedicated container to center the feelings and voices of Black people. For those who are not part of the Black community, we welcome you and encourage you to bear witness, listen, and learn in allyship. The majority of us here are from the United States, which is also known as Turtle Island by Native Americans and their allies. I'm currently in the Lenape-Hoking, where a large city called New York is located on occupied land, New York and New Jersey. Wherever you are, I ask you to join me in acknowledging Indigenous communities in North America, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. And the reason I'm stating this is because it's a step toward continuing to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and white supremacy. So right now, we're interested in knowing where you're located. So please put in the chat where you're calling from or where you're tuning in from. And there's a very helpful map. It's called native-land.ca. You can check that out to learn more about locations of Indigenous people. And now I'd like to also say a few words about the duo that put this event together. I had the pleasure of introducing them last year when they hosted the town hall for the African-American community. And this is such an amazing time. I'll start with Dr. Karinn Glover. Woo! An assistant professor of psychiatry at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, where she teaches psychopharmacology and psychotherapy. Her career as a consultant and educator has informed her expertise in the fields of health equity, workplace mental health, and organizational success. Dr. Karinn Glover has a website, www.drkarinn.com, and you can follow her at Dr. Karinn. And next up is Dionne Monsanto, who is the Chief Joy Connector and founder of Joyous Ocean. She is a best-selling author, coach, speaker, mental health advocate, and performer. Dionne sits on the National Chapter Leadership Council for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and is active with the New York City chapter as well. In 2020, she participated as a Reimagine Table Talk speaker and as a workshop leader at Reimagine's Gratitude Gathering. In 2021, she co-led a table talk for BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. Dionne, you're a rock star. website if you want to learn more about her work. It's www.joyceocean.com or www.joyceocean.com/101 Ways Book Sample. Follow her at Dionne Monsanto. So without further ado, welcome back, Dionne and Dr. Glover.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Those intros are so awesome. Don't you feel like, who are they talking about, right, Karinn? Like,
I mean, that's why I started dancing. I was like, well, look, I might as well enjoy. I might make the most of this moment.
right?
Shine a light on Dionne.
Not by Dr. Karinn. I want to meet her. I want to meet them. Well, thank you. And thank you, Chris. I'm glad that we get to celebrate your 1-year anniversary a little early and look at what we're talking about. And before we start, I did put in the chat that I'm in Washington Heights, and I did not say that my pronouns are she and her, and it's the Muncie Lenape land. Something, I'm going to pass it to Karinn in a second, but something that we wanted to do, and I love that when we put out how we were outlining this, to have a grounding exercise, because wherever we are in the world and physically in space, if we're at home, if we're at work, if we're feeling great, if we're not feeling great, just a couple of grounding exercises to start in breath. So wherever you are, and hopefully nobody's driving, because I will ask you to close your eyes. You, my dear person, if you are driving, do not close your eyes. But everyone, wherever you are, take a really deep breath in. And then open your mouth and sigh it out. If you can make noise where you are. Ah. We'll do that a couple more times. Deep breath in. Open your mouth, sigh it out. Ah. And this time, with your eyes closed, seal your lips, take a deep breath in, keeping your mouth closed. Let the air go. And then you can open your eyes. We took 3 slow, long, deep breaths, and I would love to hear from our community today what that did for you and how you feel. And you can type that in the chat. 1 word, 2 words, just throw it in there. Because what it did for me, it allowed me to ground in my body and feel, yes, settled, centered, grounded, just to like, okay, I'm here, less anxious, all of that. We're here together, and wherever we're hailing from, physically, mentally, because we hail from a specific mental space as well. Now, we took a few deep breaths together so we can commit to being together. And the other tradition that we have that is not only mine is the pouring of libation. So I will do that. What I did was bring next to me a plant. This plant generally sits on my table. It is a Christmas cactus, but it makes me happy to have greenery around. And libation, if you've never heard of pouring libation, it is an acknowledgement. I think it's particularly relevant for this community, Reimagine, because there's so much reimagining that we're doing around grief and loss and how we show up, that it's nice to acknowledge, again, the ancestors, acknowledging what's above and what's below. Whatever your spiritual practice is, you will see, I think those of us and so many people hailing from New York City, that you'll see somebody on the street open up a bottle and they'll pour out a little bit. So you're acknowledging and giving spirits to spirits that are not with us. I'm simply using water in a glass cup and pouring it into the mug. And I'm going to mention different names. I'll call on different deities, and I'm trying to do it sitting up, whereas I normally go to the floor so you can still see me. And I'll just say different things in a couple of languages. And where you are, you can acknowledge it in your space by saying Ashe, which is an affirmation, or new, and just I'm like, I hear you, or I see you. So, Nana Esi and Beji and Sao, Daddy Kofi, Beji and Sao, Sua Bochupe and Beji and Sao. I'm asking these ancestors or gods to come and drink with us. So when I say Mbeji and Sao, I'm asking them to drink. Oshun, Beji and Sao, Shango, Mbeji and Sao. Ntakwado, Mihuri, Dionne Monsanto, pouring libation, giving thanks for today, giving thanks for tomorrow, giving thanks for this community, giving thanks to be in conversation with people I can see, people I can't see, giving thanks for the ancestors that are present, those that have transitioned, may their transition be smooth and safe. And now you get to call anybody that you've lost. So I'll mention some of my names, and although I can't hear you, call those people into the space. So Seaway, Chike, Sekile, Pops, Beulah, Helene, Bianca, George Hicks, George Marquez, all the ancestors that have been named, all the ancestors that haven't been named, we ask them to guide us and protect us and make this day a great day, as well as those that come after. Madasi, thank you. Madasi Nanano, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we are complete with our libation. And oh, I see hearts in the chat and acknowledgement of my Christmas cactus that I intentionally didn't water, so I would water her today with you. So having said that, just so my good sister friend, Dr. Karinn, can bring her voice into the space, I did a grounding, we did breath work and the libation. I'm gonna pass it to Karinn so she can talk a little bit, and then it'll come back to me and just like why we're here, why she and I are in conversation with you about this. So my dear friend, Dr. Karinn.
So thank you. First of all, thank you for this, for the grounding exercise, for the breathing, for the libation. This is a first. I have never experienced a libation pouring during the workday. So I thank you for that, because it's one thing to be grounded in my body. It's another thing to be grounded in space and in spirit. And which really, in many ways, I think reminds us all that our identities are multi-layered, that I am not only Karinn in my body, I am Dr. Glover in clinic, but I am also Karinn Glover, born in the Bronx and located here right now on unceded Lenape territory. And simultaneously, I am in a time, we are in a time. And so the beauty of our work together, I think, in putting this together is really kind of rests in this exploration of where we are, what freedom means right now, what it meant 200 years ago, and sort of where we can take it. But it really means also kind of grasping what's at our disposal. And then I think one of the things I hope for is, as we think about moving and appreciating a deeper sense of ourselves, what that means for the world, what it means for our communities as well. So yeah. I'll pause
love
there.
That. No, I love that. And then, you know, some of the things, because I'm sure all of you have your good friends and family members, whoever you talk to. But when we have conversations, it's kind of like, okay, this holiday is here. We know it's been in conversation. It's not a new holiday. It's like it is the oldest, you know, holiday acknowledging the freedom of Black folks in this country, but it is now a federal holiday. So now with it being a federal holiday, and what does that mean for us? And how is that different? What does it mean for Black folks? And how is that different for folks of other backgrounds? And Karinn comes up with the deepest questions. She's like, well, what does that mean? What does freedom mean to African Americans in 2023? And it's like, ooh, okay, let me take a breath on that. And then we were talking beforehand, as Chris said, and a moment is when caring for each other and caring for self. When you joined, immediately, Karinn was like, I haven't eaten. Like it's 12 noon and I haven't eaten since yesterday. So what does it mean to care for oneself and care for others? And does that mean engaging in celebration and relaxation and connecting to others to uplift and enjoy the culture? And what does that mean? And then this part that I really like that Karinn said, and I don't know if she remembers saying this, because I have to take notes. Right? I saw your face, girl. Like, does it also mean just simply reveling in solitude and quiet? You know, talking about our girl Tricia Hersey and her book, Rest is Resistance, to be still and in quiet and appreciate the incredible survival stories that we come from. Like, do we have to go out and do something?
So should we also mention just the basic history, right?
Yeah. Yes, you should.
All right. So I think everybody knows that the United States was founded on the labor of indigenous and Black people, right? The free labor, the extorted, the trafficked labor of ancestors from the continent. And they toiled without reward, without freedom, day in and day out. Some were born into it here on the in the what became the United States. And in 1865, in 1863, that's sort of the Civil War. And when supposedly enslaved people were freed, it wasn't until 1865, as I understand, that the Union troops made it to Galveston Bay in Texas and found a community of people who were not aware that Black people had been freed for some time, for approximately 2 years. And so it was this encounter that became this holiday, that became this moment for recognizing, right? Not only were Black people freed, but that they were not told that they were freed. That an oppressive society was just like, well, God dang it, we're not going to do that, right? No matter if the law has changed, right? Which brings up all kinds of questions about following the law and being unlawful and when it's right and when it's wrong. And the shifts in morality that have happened over the years. But the point is to recognize not only the sacrifice of the people who worked for 200 years for free and were exploited, but then also the extra 2 years of bitter injustice that they endured, especially in the Texas community. And
I'm going to jump in. He finishes that thought. So hold your thought, put a pin in it, because I want to take it back a little bit more, because the 4th of July is coming. So when people are out here running around talking about the Declaration of Independence and Independence Day, July 4th, 1776, there's an 87-year gap.
Girl, for who?
There's an 87-year gap between that 1776 and then when some papers were signed and then we were free. So I love always coming back to on the 4th of July and posting around our dear uncle, Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
What does Independence Day mean to the Negro? Like, if you haven't heard that speech, read that speech, please do. A lot of people have done it in poetry over the years. Yes. So we're going 1776, 1865, 1867 to here we are now in 2023.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That is always, it's like, we know there's lots of ways to be an American, right? And we know that there's lots of ways to experience being Black. There's lots of ways to be Black. And so one of the things that I constantly wish more people in our country could appreciate is that there are so many ways to experience being an American. And one of them is a reminder of the trauma, the triumph as well, but noticing the trauma and noticing where it lives in us in the present moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that essay, right? Just thank you for mentioning that what does July 4th mean to somebody who can look around and say, oh, look at that corporation that was built on trafficking my ancestors. Look at that entire university that was built on selling Black people. And to what degree do I feel free to access the bounty that has been created off the backs of these humans?
Yeah. And then when we start looking at, I told you to put a pin in your thought. So before I go on, is there more you wanted to share?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's always more, but I know I know there's definitely things we want to cover, so I want to stay organized.
Okay. So when we're looking at this day, because now we went and said, okay, people have been celebrating the 4th of July, no judgment there. If you want to celebrate, you got a day off. And then I started taking notes about conversations I've been overhearing. And it's like, so we know every holiday. And if we look at now having Martin Luther King Jr. Day and what it's like to have that as a national holiday, a federal holiday, how it's celebrated in some states. So now with this as a federal holiday and how it's celebrated, And so most people, all of the holidays, that historical reference soon becomes forgotten. It's a 3-day weekend. So this is what it becomes. So being in conversation, even if it has, even the street namings, when I look at these streets, because now I'm like, there's this name of a street. The average child looking up at the name of a street, they don't know who this person is, and that level of effort that gone into these renamings that happen, and getting this day off. And some places don't get this day off. And then, but now everybody gets the day off for Juneteenth. So what does that mean? How are other people, like, are we even now that we got a day off, that there's 4th of July, and then like we got Christopher Columbus, some people get that day off. Should that be a celebrated holiday? So some feelings and thoughts about Juneteenth, and acknowledging, for me, very personally, as someone born and raised in New York City with an island background, I didn't know this history until I was an adult. I can't speak for anyone else here. I didn't hear about Juneteenth until I was an adult. This was not something that was taught in school. At least not at my age. I'm over 50, I'm 56. So like, these are things like, so the self-education, and then what do you choose to do? And how do you choose to celebrate? And because it's acknowledging freedom, I want to do a deep dive, and at some point, raise your hand, type in the chat, hearing people like, what does freedom mean to you? Because that's the part that I thought was particularly deep from Dr. Karinn. And like, how do we look at what freedom means? Because what I personally did not want is somebody that's always musing around, what does self-care look like? And if we want to have longevity in our lives and celebrating these things like, what does it mean to move your body and take up space and use your voice? And in what ways are we free? We're not in shackles. Dr. Karinn and I, we didn't share our history. We know each other from dance class many moons ago. And so when I think of dances, and I see, if you remember this one, we do Jondon and Wolosodon, the dance of the indentured servant, right? And you have these shackles on for part of it, so the movements are limited. And then the Wolosodon, when you're free and you're dancing, so we move freely in space, but energetically, there are still feelings in which there is entrapment, and how we're feeling emotionally when we're going to a place. Going to a conference. I'm going to go to a conference in Florida next year. Yes, that exact face that Dr. Karinn made. If you didn't see it, you'll have to watch it in the replay. Conversation like, how do I feel about being a 5-foot short Black female going to a state where it feels like my color and my existence is a crime? And how, if somebody is fearful of how am I free? I am free to go there, but am I free to move in spaces? So what does that mean? And how will I celebrate? So I'll pause there before we talk about a little bit more about how we may choose to celebrate publicly or privately. Because I saw your face and I know that inspired things.
Well, so I was jotting down some things that I just want to make sure I cover. One of the things that came up when you and I were talking about doing this talk was essentially starting small, like what was our experience with it? So I am African American. Both of my parents' ancestors going back at least 200 years were from the United States. We think our ancestors were trafficked from Sierra Leone, perhaps. On my mom's side, on my dad's side, we don't know. And so growing up, I'm the daughter of a history teacher and a public health worker, a New York City Department of Public Health worker. My mom still teaches on the university level and on the college level, I should say. And so I grew up hearing the term Juneteenth, but I didn't really know what it was about. It was when I was a history major at Howard University, Black college, founded in 1867. That's when I started to really grasp and started to get to know Black people from Texas. That's when I started to understand that Juneteenth was a thing in certain places, right? Here on the East Coast with my South Carolina relatives, they were like, you know. So it has been wonderful to learn of just this constant effort that I think people who have been oppressed or overcome trauma take something as deeply traumatic and as isolating and alienating and depressing, frankly, as slavery, and turn it into a celebration, turn it into a reason to reconnect with community and to take advantage of space and gather, right? Because one of the things that we don't talk about very often is that even after slavery, right, a number of laws were put into place to control the movements of Black people, right? There were these things called Black codes that went into effect, a system of laws that said like only a couple of Black people can gather in public, right? And we know that after the end of slavery, Black people could not, they were not employed. The Southern economy was ravaged, so people were hungry, they were destitute, they were unhoused. And so it was natural, I think, for people to gather to sort of figure out resources. But unfortunately, for 2 to 3 years after what we call manumission, after emancipation, people wanted to gather to find resources, but they would be arrested for doing so. And then in the process of being arrested, they would be contracted out by the county to the plantation, the forced labor camp where they had just been freed from, right? So we know that just even the act of gathering while Black is an act of resistance. It is an act of celebration. It is an act of defiance, even, because we know even though the law says you're free, you can go where you want to go, how the law is practiced just sort of harkens right on back to what got us enslaved in the first place. So yeah, I'll pause there.
And the current day part to what Dr. Karinn is saying is now we know about the prison system, right? So there are certain things, and when we're talking about how laws have changed and what justice is and how it's served when a person of color, a Black person, goes to jail and why they go to jail compared to others. And that, so now you're not signed back to the enslavement camp, the plantation, you're assigned to a prison. And then that prison, there are certain things and products that we buy that are made by folks that are in prison. And then some people, if you saw the 1619 Project, that was so wonderfully done. There was the one movie that I saw was on music, but it ended with something, and I don't know if I'd even say the word, the thing that a lot of people order things from that comes really fast. And they've compared that AM, that AM place that people shop from, myself included. I tried, but I still shop there. But they liken to how those people are forced to ship and deliver to being enslaved. So there's so many different ways. So what is this freedom and how will we celebrate? So being mindful of time, because y'all are deeply listening. So I don't see you putting your thoughts in the chat. I've seen some thoughts come in with hearts and ashe. But if you have thoughts about what we said, feel free to raise your hand or pop something in the chat, but to go through now. And with all that history that we have shared from the 1700s to 2023 now, how are you gonna celebrate? What you gonna do on Monday? What you gonna do? And we had started to plan a family gathering. One of my dear friends in the audience here is doing a wonderful gathering in Harlem and can share that information. It's something she's been doing for years. And if she has a link, I'll tell her to throw it in the chat. But if we choose to stay home, is that okay? Because my concern in our conversation, I did not want people to feel the burden of having to do something. It's like, well, you're Black, you know, you celebrate Juneteenth, right? It's like, well, my people are not from the South. My food choices and how the food that I was raised with are not the Southern foods, the Caribbean foods, and all of this, like, what is that experience? And what you choose is right. Because also, as she said, There are so many ways to show up in your body, in your culture. The way I show up as Black is not the way as, I'm just throwing names out there aside from Karinn, that Chris is, that Carol, that Carol does. We're all different. So how you choose to experience it is different. So if you choose to stay home, that's okay. And I don't think people should feel shame around, oh, I didn't go to this event. There are wonderful events happening all weekend. But if you are tired and your weekend is spent doing laundry, doing shopping, and doing all the things that you're not able to do during a 5-day work week, depending on your employment situation, if you choose a day of rest, I'm here to say your ancestors will be so happy.
Look, come on with it. Look.
Your ancestors will be so happy. But in that light of gathering, being an act of resistance, if you choose to gather, fine. But it's not like, oh, I really should have, I wish I should have gone to the Brooklyn Museum is doing this fabulous thing. I should do that. I should do this. Or what are the foods that I should eat? And, because the food choices, as somebody that primarily works with people around their health and as a wellness coach, get really concerned about these food choices we celebrate holidays with and what we do to our body. But I get, we've got a history of famine. So why don't we feast when we celebrate?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love just the exploration of this, of freedom and of body autonomy, right? Like, so exploring the bodily autonomy that we have that our ancestors didn't have, and being able to say, as Tricia Hersey would say, I'm gonna take this moment to just go ahead and relax my body and take a quiet moment and rest my eyes, or take a nap, or I never let myself take a nap. So I actually am going to be in Texas. I'm flying to Texas to understand more about what Juneteenth in Galveston is like. So I'll report back. But another thing that you said that sticks with me, Dionne, is this notion of how you simultaneously say to yourself, I want to celebrate. I want to do the things maybe that my ancestors were not allowed to do, or just even Black people 10 years ago were not allowed to do or were frowned upon for doing. So for example, wearing your hair natural, taking a moment to just not wear makeup, or to say, look, I want to explore the outdoors. I want to take advantage of things that my ancestors didn't have access to. I want to be outside and take up space and know that the police are not going to be called on me. If my children are running and enjoying life and being kids, I want to know that they're safe, and I'm going to find a place where we can do that. I might even let my body move some and see what happens when I move in ways that made me happy when I was a kid, maybe dancing or playing games. Because, right, as we learned during those dances that you described, the choreography often helped us transmute a concept. Take a concept like freedom or slavery, and to embody it, and then to set it free.
Yes.
So we got options.
We have options. And that, coming back to this whole concept of Juneteenth being a celebration of our freedom, sit with it. Where you are right now with us, and share, like, what does that mean for you? I'm so excited to hear that you're going to be in Texas, because we really do. Y'all are just hearing us talk. This is a kid. I'm like, girl, what's it like? Talk to me. Because I'm imagining and envisioning, when I look online, there is a big celebration when I've seen videos of what has happened there, and it makes sense because that's on the ground. When we look at various, even if we go to other holidays now, totally different. Veterans Day doesn't mean the same thing to me as it does to someone that served in the military. So Juneteenth doesn't mean the same thing to me as it does to someone in Galveston, Texas. But we get to participate and celebrate with them and amplify it. And then looking at what it means in sharing these holidays. I often say holy days because we make them sacred with our celebration and how we look at them. What does it mean, and the respect for someone there to go like, wow, they see this wrong so much, and that everybody gets to celebrate it now. Through my pain and suffering, the entire country gets to acknowledge this. And I don't know if we put this in our notes, Karinn, but I also even want to bring forward to, we know why we got this holiday in 2021 as a federal holiday.
Hello.
Like all of the civil unrest, like specifically pointing to the murder of George Floyd, not the only murder that happened in 2021 of a Black and brown person, but the one that received a lot of press, and there was a lot of civil unrest. And it was like this compromise, and also looking at, okay, we have this holiday, and that now what else are we fighting for? What other freedoms do we deserve? What other freedoms do we desire? And how do we show up in that? And that juxtaposition of, I want to celebrate, I want to rest, but there's still more things to fight for. I don't want people to go like, oh, we got Juneteenth, we got Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we good.
So one of the things that you and I talked about that was on my list was just what reclaiming, right? Reclaiming time, in the words of Maxine Waters, the divine Congresswoman. But also, what does it mean financially when we think about reclaiming? When we think about freedom, there are certain freedoms that our ancestors did not have access to because they were bonded to the work and to places, right? And goodness, often when we talk about stuff like this, I feel like I have to be super careful to not end up ranting. So I like to pause to just like make sure I'm gathered, make sure I'm—
Take a breath, and you could take a breath.
That's right. I take a breath, I pause. But I bring that up because I want us to always think about not only our mental health, obviously, right? Because I'm a psychiatrist, but our general health, because the mind and the body are one, and where freedom intersects with our mental and our general health. And part of that, I think, has to do with, there's so much data that shows that folks in poverty have less access and less freedom to take advantage of some of the better health options, some of the better food options, some of the better air, right? We know that most recently, all of us were affected by some really toxic air, right? And so when we start to think about where and how we find our freedom and our health, and where it's affected by the environment, all of these things, and where our income can buffer us, who has access to an air purifier and who doesn't, all of those things came up for me over the past week.
Absolutely, because I did not have one, and I did buy one, and I looked at the cost of it when I purchased it, and to your point, I was like, wow. And to be able to have masks, because people have been unmasked, although, people are still sick. I know someone right now in Bermuda that has COVID. So, but unmasked, and so like, I had to go back to wearing a mask. Some of you that know me, like, I had a severe case of pneumonia in 2011, and I was hospitalized for 3 days. That breathing, with all my windows closed on my couch, I was breathing so shallow. It was the breathing that I had when I had pneumonia again. Like, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I remember this feeling, and just canceling everything. And to your point as well, having the ability to cancel things and stay home was a freedom of choice that I had, whereas somebody in, based on what's going on in their life economically, they may not have been able to take that choice and stay home and allow my lungs. I literally kept the windows in this house closed for several days. I only opened them in the past 2 days, honestly. So yeah, I'm gonna pause, and I'm gonna see, I wanna see if y'all have, if we wanna hear, I'd love to hear a voice, or if you type something in the chat to hear what you have to say before, because we could keep talking. And I wanna make sure, Dr. Karinn, says they did mention in her intro, she does have another meeting after this. And if you have questions, I'm gonna stay on a little longer, But just if there's something, if there's a question that you have, I'm going to questions a little bit earlier than we planned, but I just want to have space for you, our audience members, our extended family, to share your voice and ask a question in the chat, or in person if you want to share your voice. Otherwise, Karinn and I could talk until tomorrow.
We can. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my
So
favorite things.
while y'all are thinking, I'm going to look through some of the things that people said in the chat. And
Yeah, there's a wonderful comment here. A couple of wonderful comments about, yeah.
So I'll go from the last to the first. Forgive me if I mispronounce the names. Gerlaine says, I'm also of Caribbean descent, born in the States, Brooklyn, to immigrant parents from Haiti. Juneteenth is conflicting both from the perspective of my ancestry, similar but not the same as African-American experience. And let's see, what Juneteenth inherently represents, and to celebrate freedom, and yet freedom for those in this country of the USA labeled broadly as Black still feels elusive and tenuous. I will spend this Juneteenth resting and reading. I celebrate that with you, Ghislaine. And Latifa says, movement for me is liberating. When I incorporate our history, it goes to another level. I taught my students our history through dance and poetry. I also teach my grandchildren and great-grands this way. Mama Latifa led a school years ago, so my first or second African dance class was with her dance school here in Harlem many moons ago, although she's not in New York right now. So yes, I have the benefit of her teachings and Mama Latifa. And Johnny, love what Dr. Glover said about how there are lots of ways to experience being Black. And then sister friend Crystal Williams put a flyer in the chat so you can see where the 3rd annual Juneteenth celebration is happening in Harlem on Saturday. Carol Tolliver, in California, working closely with CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. On Juneteenth, we will be canvassing to educate community about reparations. Yes, about reparations and the upcoming release of the final report of the California Task Force on Reparation. You see, you got Dr. Karinn dancing with that one. There's a bill in New York as well. I can't speak intelligently to it, but I know I was in different demonstrations for that. So there's something that is coming up in New York as well. And then Andy had popped in, and I dropped in a link about exploring stories and what the 4th of July means to someone that was enslaved. Andy dropped in the chat the Tricia Hersey Rest is Resistance book. Ghislaine says, Reveling in Silence. And yeah, A Heart for America, Ashe. Oh, Karinn says she likes a Christmas cactus. Yes, I'm hoping it flowers this year. We shall see. So thank you all. Well, before, oh, what's that? Tell them, go ahead, tell us what you put in there.
Oh, yeah. So for folks who are interested in the experiences of enslaved and freed Black people in New York, I urge you to check out the Black Gotham experience. They conduct walking tours. They also do events that really acquaint you with the experience of enslaved Black people who were here in the 1700s and 1800s. If you go to Central Park on your day off, maybe consider looking at some of the plaques around Seneca Village, where Seneca Village had been a homestead, a community of Black people, and I believe some Indigenous people as well, and was knocked down and destroyed and filled in to create many parts of Central Park. So I think it's worth it. Wherever you go and whatever you decide to do, if you feel like adding in some sprinkles of Black history and just absorbing some of what freedom means to you, maybe also think about what freedom means to other people and what it has meant over the years.
Yeah, I love that. I wasn't familiar with Black Gotham, so thank you for that. But what I also think of, as someone like you, born and raised here, specifically in New York City, and being 56, when I'm walking around, there's layers of memory even for me. So when I think of my mother and my grandmother, my grandmother not being born here, and she has transitioned, she's passed away, but seeing what it looks like and feeling these layers of memory. And I have layers of memory in my body. So I can only imagine to be in a certain space and think of the nonagenarians, the people that I know that are over 90, and what it is to move in space and have the memory of not being able to move freely in space. So just even in your rest, to have a silent reflection as you're walking through and wonder, what was it like before the cars? What was it like with the horses? What was it like before cell phones? An act of resistance sometimes could be turning your daggone cell phone off so nobody can reach you. You know, we're so, it feels like inextricably tied to technology, and thankful for it. I can be in conversation in Manhattan, in Washington Heights, with Dr. Karinn in the Bronx, and people that are joining from different places around the country because of the internet, but also creating space, you know, creating space so you can physically move your body, that you can mentally feel like, oh, I don't have to respond to this.
Yeah. Yeah. Reclaiming, right? Reclaiming your time, reclaiming your space, reclaiming yourself.
Mhm.
Right. I love. One of my patients used to remind me sometimes. She would point out sometimes, like, you look a little tired. She just said, remember, it's okay. Sometimes you just need to rest your mind. And she said it just like that. I'm giving the Black scent that she used as well, because I that's how I hear it in my head to this day. And she said that to me about 10 years ago.
Mm.
That sometimes you really do need to rest your mind, and however you do that is how you do that. I'm curious about how people are interpreting freedom lately, knowing, our country's going through lots of changes. Our world is going through lots of changes. I'm wondering what freedom means to people now. And if it's changed. Maybe it's always meant the same thing, but I'm curious if it's changed. So I'm hoping that folks will drop in the chat and just give a couple of words about what freedom means to them these days.
Mm-hmm. And we're willing to hear your voice if you're willing to share it, but type in the chat, keep typing. Many of you have been typing in the chat, keep typing in the chat. But I know when you say that, I often think about with the clothes, like definitely, Crystal put freedom equals safety, right? Yeah, and so you may remember it because I'm struggling to hear Nina Simone's interview when someone asked her, what would it mean for her? And it was a very simple answer, but it does reminiscence of the safety. And safety is not just safety. I always feel it's not just physical safety. I think emotional safety. There are certain places I still will walk into expecting there to be commentary on the hair, or today I'm not dressed in African print garb, but to say that, like, oh, I was in corporate America. I worked for Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan Chase for almost 20 years, and always looking at these things, and they go like, oh, you're so colorful today. And I was like, thanks, I think. It's like these side-eye compliments where you're like, okay, I'm going into this space. I need to emotionally prepare for certain things.
Yeah.
Mama Latifa said, my mother could not watch Roots because it was too painful for her as a person who actually lived in South Carolina and experiences that to what Alex Haley experienced. And, she experienced, what was on TV. And Verlaine says, freedom is feeling more and more like an internal work first, yes, and foremost, that then translates into a world that seems to distress freedom and fears it. Oh, I love that, yeah. And what that feeling is. And really, Valerie, another friend, Valerie says, friend equals choice, freedom equals choice equals options, yes. And coming back to what you choose to do or not do on this particular holiday, Juneteenth, June 19th, is your choice, and feel fully empowered and have pushback if anyone expresses any level of judgment on what you choose to do or not do. Go ahead.
So I have a thought, and it's there's this wonderful researcher, David R. Williams at Harvard School of Public Health, and he looks at health equity. And he looks at the toll of not only big racism with a big R, but also sort of like microaggressions and experiences of discrimination. And he looks at how those affect blood pressure, how it affects weight, how it affects abdominal fat, how it affects the quality of your sleep. And so I'm looking back up at Crystal's statement that freedom equals safety. And I think about the places where and when I, as a person who wakes up and moves through the world in a Black woman's body, the things that you describe, you get to work and somebody says, oh, look, you're so colorful today. And it's a half compliment, but it's half alienating and othering, right? And a little just a genre of microaggression. And then you go to a meeting, and as a woman, people speak over you. They don't even hear your ideas. And then you kind of go like, boy, that was hard. I struggled to get my ideas across. They heard me though. So I'm in kind of a good mood because they heard me, but I had to fight for it. Maybe had to fight for more than the average man would have. And then you leave work, and on your way to the gym, perhaps you get catcalled in the street, and you're reminded that you're a woman walking alone and the sun is setting. And then you go to the gym, you do the thing. And then on your way home, you see that something happened to an unarmed Black person. The toll of that, right? Nobody burned a cross on your lawn. Nobody said, hey, we're going to lock you up. We're going to send you back to slavery. But what you did experience, the cumulative effect of it may leave you with higher blood pressure than your non-Black counterpart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Despite the fact that you and I had a lovely conversation just now, and the fact that you might go to sleep and sleep well. But the fact that you went through what you went through over the course of your day, that in some ways your Blackness interrupted people's whatever, right? They had to comment on your hair. They had to tell you, oh, I like it better when you do the blowouts, when your hair is straight, Karinn. The experience of that and the cumulative experience of that has, for a good number of people, the potential to cause premature aging. It is associated with premature aging.
And say his name again.
David R. Williams.
Okay.
And he has something called the Everyday Discrimination Scale. It's a 9-item questionnaire that assesses the exposure to everyday incidents of discrimination and microaggressions. And he follows people over time, people of all backgrounds. And repeatedly, he finds that Black people are more likely to report discrimination, right? So where's your freedom? If there's no sign saying no Blacks allowed, or there's no entrance that says colored only. But when you do enter, what happens when you get there? Are you treated kindly? Are you treated like you are welcome? Are you treated like an alien, like like other? So,
well, now, and on that, I don't know if it's on there, as I have my fan, because I'm having a personal hot flash. Because I know when I start sweating or different things happening, even with that, people was like, oh my goodness. I was like, it's called a hot flash. Oh, and I was like, it's okay. Like, it's menopause. Oh, I was like, yeah, this is just a part of life. I can say the word, it's not a bad word. It's menopause. And I'm thankful that I've reached this point of life to cross into another level of womanhood and what that means. But there are moments like us, I'm a sweat, I'm a glitter, I'm a glow. And what does that mean? Because I remember when it first started and going to do a speaking event, I would be mortified. Like, what if I start sweating? You could tell them it's a hot flash because people have heard of menopause. So I love this. Oh, Johnny put a link in the chat and Andy put a link in the chat to the study that Karinn was talking about. So Mama Latifa says, thank you. And since it's Karinn and I know that my girl has someone that's going to be waiting for her shortly. So I'm giving her a big hug. I'm taking this time to give her a big hug, and hopefully I'll get to hug her in person. It's amazing that she's in the Bronx and I'm in Manhattan, but we see each other so infrequently throughout the year. And what does that mean? And that's one of the freedoms I definitely enjoy on some of these holy days, to try to connect with people that you haven't connected with. And I appreciate you, Karinn, for being here.
I appreciate you, Dionne. Thank you for allowing me the space to talk my talk and to share what I hope gives people a better sense of how to take care of themselves, to check in with themselves, do that breath work that you need to do after you've had a moment where somebody tells you they like it better when your hair is straight, or that why are you so shiny, perimenopausal lady, and you take a moment to just really, really love your body, waking up and moving through the world in your body as you get older comes with its challenges. And yet I hope that we all have the energy and take time this weekend to meet our bodies where it is and keep on appreciating. So Dionne, thank you.
Love you, girl. And I'll
Love
talk
you.
to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for being here and sharing so lovingly in the chat. I am going to pass the floor to my dear partner, Andy, as he represents Reimagine, and he'll let you know about all the different things coming up.
Thank you, Dionne. And I'm so grateful to you, to Dr. Karinn, to my colleague, Chris Thompson, to everyone at Reimagine who made this gathering possible. I thank all of you for showing up. And I'm gonna grab some links to post now in the chat for everyone, and I'm gonna talk about them. I won't take up too much of your time here, but I do wanna mention that in an hour, we have a new series that we've been hosting monthly. It's called Room for Grief, and it's a drop-in session on the third Thursday of every month. We're offering peer-led support when you need it for all kinds of grief that you may be experiencing. So if that speaks to you today, please register for that. I also want to mention that on Father's Day, on Sunday, we'll be joined by death doula Nefertiti Moore to honor our fathers, our father figures, and ancestors, and she'll be leading a death meditation and a living funeral ceremony. And finally, I want to mention that our next monthly vigil to mourn all of our losses is on July 5th, and we're featuring two guests, author Nicole Chung, who'll discuss her new memoir about navigating grief and rage and making sense of the lives of her adoptive parents. We'll also hear stories and music from saxophonist Jimmy Green, whose daughter Anna Grace died at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, and that was over a decade ago. And I want to thank everyone who's already made a donation to Reimagine for this free event. And if you wish to support more free programs like this, please consider doing that. And I'm going to hand this back to you, Dionne, for some wrapping up and final goodbyes.
Okay, thank you. I will say, there we go. What I think is really important for all of us that you showed up is that you take time to acknowledge yourself, and whatever that means, to celebrate yourself, and that you're doing great. I loved everything that I saw in the chat in terms of people thanking us, but thank you. Dr. Karinn and I love talking to each other, and thank Reimagine. I also want to thank them for hosting us. I always thank my mom because, I have agency and voice because she allowed that. And whoever you need to thank, yourself and others, and if they're living or not, acknowledge them and thank them, and make choices that serve your physical, mental, and emotional health, and allow that to be a way that you celebrate the freedoms that you do have. And yeah, I like a little pushback as well. And so taking time for yourself. So one thing that I say that I often tell people is like, a lot of us, and it was majority women here, we will say yes when for our own mental, physical, and emotional health, the answer probably should have been no. So allow yourself a pause, allow yourself a breath before you go into the yes. Could you participate? Yes. Would it be better for you to rest? Maybe. And you'll enjoy that. So thank each and every one of you. And I do love Reimagine, and I'm very grateful for this space. And there's so many things that you can participate there and share. So I look forward to seeing you again, hearing from you. You'll get another email that you can share, because when you get the email, maybe you want to share it with someone that wasn't here, that you think has a tidbit of information that could benefit them. So I am complete, Andy. Thank you so much, and have a phenomenal day, everyone. Whatever you're choosing to do on this wonderful Thursday, experience joy. I often say to my clients and friends that joy is your birthright and transformation is possible. Thank you for the kisses, Ellen. Bye, Crystal. Oh, thank you for the heart, Mike.